find yourself arrogantly judging other people? Do you find yourself being somebody who is easily provoked and accounts for every wrong in everybody else and has no hope of ever being pleased? If you notice any of those things within yourself, make sure you stay tuned for today's video. We are talking about how spiritual abuse can make us very critical of ourselves and very critical and judgmental of other people. And if you stay tuned, first we're going to be talking about how we become so critical of ourselves and how to break free from that. But also we're going to be talking about being critical and judgmental of other people, which is something that I have dealt with in my own life after going through spiritual abuse. And so I'll tell you that you're normal for feeling that way. It's something so many of us feel, and it doesn't make you a bad Christian. It just means that you've gone through something painful, but hurt people. And I don't want you, nor me, or any of us to hurt people because of the hurt that's been done to us. So make sure you stay tuned to the end to hear a little bit more about how to heal those things within yourself when you find yourself being so critical and judgmental of other people. Before we jump into the first part of today's video, if you would like to work with me one-on-one, I'll link my information on the screen for one-on-one coaching. Also, I live in Western North Carolina, and so if you would like to give to what my church is doing for hurricane relief efforts, I have been out with them on the ground. I trust what they are doing with money, which is very, very important, and I will also link in the description ways that you could partner with what our church is doing. So let's get into the first part, being critical of ourselves. Think about how often do you tell yourself that there is nobody harder on yourself than you. And as a trauma survivor, it is very easy to point out and become your biggest critic, because if you can acknowledge everything that's wrong with you, then you have the control and nobody else can hurt you by pointing out things that they don't like in you. If you can already acknowledge them all yourself, then there's no way that you're giving that control away for you to be hurt. Maybe you don't know if you're self-critical. And if you are, you'll probably hear yourself saying things often like, wow, can't believe I messed that up again. Maybe you'll say, oh, I'm so stupid. I can never get anything right. God never loves me. I can never do anything good. I'm no good at anything. I have nothing unique about me. I'm not special. I don't know if you maybe say some of those things, or if you notice yourself saying something similar, but it's a shame response that we adopt after going through trauma. And today we're specifically talking about spiritual abuse. And so it's something that we adopt about ourselves after going through these things, and it's there to keep us safe. And this is a habit that we adopt of being overly harsh, judgmental, or negative towards ourselves. And another way that this can manifest in our lives, and you'll hear this term a lot, is in perfectionism. It is setting these really high standards for ourselves that when we can not meet these impossible standards, that we become so hard on ourselves and beat ourselves up and pick apart every little thing we do. And after going through spiritual abuse, maybe you were in an environment with a very heavy-handed leader or pastor who was over what you were doing or in your ministry, and they were constantly critical of everything you did. It's constantly, you're not good enough. It's constantly, your faith isn't strong enough. It's constantly everything that you're doing wrong, and there's no building up of the things that you're doing right. There is no edifying. There is no encouragement. It is just constantly criticism. And if you've been in an environment with a pastor or a leader or somebody in the church who's treated you that way with little to no respect, constantly criticizing everything you do, that was painful. That hurt you. It maybe was a blow to your self-esteem and your confidence and maybe even your faith. And it is recognizing and noticing where these wounds come in that we can A, forgive, and then B, heal, so that we don't have to continue to walk out our lives with these wounds and with this self-blame, that when something goes wrong, and it will because we're human and life is hard, that immediately we stop blaming ourselves for every little thing that we do and every little circumstance that is beyond our control. And we learn to offer ourselves and extend to ourselves some compassion and understanding. And when we don't, when we allow these things to continue to manifest in our lives and fester and grow like an infection, then it creates low self-esteem. And that can affect so many areas of your life, personal, professional, your relationships. And I'll tell you, I see this with clients all the time, that after going through spiritual abuse and being in environments where they were so criticized, where they were watched constantly, every little thing they were doing, I wouldn't even say micromanaged, it was just oddly watched by pastors and leaders, that it developed this critic within themselves where they were over analyzing every single thing they did. And oh my gosh, is this biblical? Is this okay? Is this right? Is this wrong? Am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this right? Am I going to get favor for doing this? Are they going to be upset with me for doing this? And oh my gosh, I mean, I'm exhausted just from saying all of that. Imagine how exhausting that feels. Imagine how exhausted maybe you feel, because you're recognizing that that is what you went through. And as you come out of that environment, all of those thought processes, all of those behaviors and belief systems that you came into agreement with, all of that negative self-talk that you came into agreement with because of the things that were said or done to you in that environment, you'll carry those with you into your work environment. And I have so many women who I work with who say that they feel like they're slacking at work, and they feel like they're not doing a good job at this, and they're not doing a good job at that. And we break it down a little bit more, and I'm like, okay, so you have all of these things going for you right now. You have all of these people at work who are giving you accolades for how well you're doing, and you don't think you're worthy of it. You don't understand why they're giving you those accolades, and it doesn't make sense to you, and you just feel like you're not enough. And it's something so many of us feel, and so many of us have gone through, and it's something so many of the women clients that I have feel after going through these environments. And the first step is realizing and recognizing that it's a lie. And if it's a lie from the enemy, and it's a negative belief that you've come into agreement with, then that means it's not true. And so what is the truth? And that's where we can find liberation. Because the last thing I want you to do is to adopt these coping mechanisms like perfectionism or even avoidance, where you avoid any challenges or situations or opportunities because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to let people down. And that hinders your life. When you think about it, think about some of the most beautiful memories you have in your life. Some of the most amazing things you've done or experienced that you're proud of. Did that come from playing it safe? Did those things come from being cautious and beating yourself down and taking no risks? I'm not talking about physical safety. I'm talking about the safety within, which really, is a false sense of security, because when are we ever truly safe? Because it isn't safe to do things that aren't what God's called us to do. There is no really safety in that, because it's not going to make us happy. And so when you think about the things in your life that you've done that you're proud of and that have made you happy, and I'll just say things, for example, for myself. When I was in college, I decided to leave all of my friends that I've made in the community I built and move to Washington, D.C. to work for a local news bureau in Washington, D.C. And that was one of the hardest things at that time of my age. I've gone through harder things since then, but at that time, it was one of the hardest things I'd done. And I moved out there all by myself. And, it took a lot of bravery for me in that moment to say, hey, I need to take a step out. And, I also needed to get out of the environment I was in. It wasn't the most healthy. And so how am I going to do that? And I took a step, and I got out there and I did things that I was really proud of to start my journalism career, and which led me to what I do now with life coaching and other things. And, I never would have experienced that. I would never have had these memories that I'm so proud of that I've done and that I've accomplished if I hadn't taken that step. But if in that moment I would have allowed that inner critic to say, you're never going to be able to accomplish this, you're not smart enough for this, you're not good enough for this, then I never would have had these beautiful memories that I've built my life and my career upon because of those things. And I want you to think about those memories yourself. I don't want you to live a life that is safe, because again, like we were saying, it isn't safe because you're not going to be happy. I don't want you to live a life that's boring and secluded and devoid of any risk and adventure and opportunity because you're scared to trust yourself and you're scared to trust other people. That's not a life that I want you to live, and it's not a life I want to live either. And so we have to heal. As painful as it is to heal, it's even more painful to look back on a life and say, wow, I wish I would have forgiven. I wish I would have forgiven myself. I wish I would have let go of the pain and the trauma, and I wish I would have healed from it. And I wish I would have grown from those things and moved on with my life. I wish I would have done those things. And I don't want to have to say that about myself. And I'll tell you now, just getting really plugged into a new church and with everything going on with the Hurricane Helene over here, it really pushed me out of my boat to get more involved in this church since we moved here. We moved here 2 months ago and have been going. And there's that hesitancy. I hadn't really gotten connected with a church since everything that happened with me in the ministry that I worked for, and just so many things with spiritual abuse and so many environments that I was in. And I hadn't gotten connected with a new church yet. And it's scary. It's scary to trust again. It's scary to give the benefit of the doubt. It's scary, and I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to go through what I went through again. But I also don't want to live a life where I never try again, where I never get plugged into another community of really good, kind-hearted, well-intentioned people again. I don't want to miss out on that. And it's been stretching, and I find myself, and we're going to talk about it more, looking for what I could be critical about, looking for how I can pick out the flaws to protect myself. And it's this thing that our brains do to protect us from danger. When it senses danger, when we're in these environments, when we're trying out a new church again, it's like, whoa, this is the place we got hurt. Like, we need to protect ourselves from this. We're going to point out every little thing that they do wrong. And that's not to say you shouldn't look for red flags. And that's not to say that you should turn a blind eye to things that don't seem right. You definitely should not do either of those things. Be cautious. Look out. Pray, have a sound mind, make sound decisions, look for wisdom, look for churches, which we talk about, have transparency, they're healthy, they do good things with their money, they have accountability and leadership, all of that. But don't be overly critical where you're picking apart every little thing, because you're always going to find something wrong, right? We're humans. And within this time, it's been stretching, but it's been beautiful to open myself up to the possibility of what could be again. And so that leads me into the part of the antidote. How can we move past and heal this inner self-critic? Well, firstly, it's being compassionate with ourselves. The Bible verse that says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Like, okay, we've got that. Know that one. And how often do you hear the second part, which is to love your neighbor as yourself? There is no commandment greater than these. So how are you going to love other people when you don't love yourself? Think about it. If you are so critical and harsh on yourself, you are going to be that same way with other people. If you offer yourself empathy and compassion, that is what you're going to extend to other people as well. Those people you see online, like the keyboard warriors who are so just nasty and mean, that's because that is how they treat themselves. And so that is what they project to other people. People in your life, maybe people they're just really nasty to you, constantly criticizing every little thing that you do, and just know that that's what they do to themselves on the inside, which makes you want to extend them a little compassion, because you kind of feel bad. You're like, man, you must be having a really hard inner life. You must be having a really hard time in here, and that's sad. And maybe me just turning the cheek and being kind and letting it go will help you break free from that. So the next thing with self-compassion is how you treat yourself, with that kindness, with that understanding, with that support that you would offer a friend in times of difficulty or suffering. It's practicing, nurturing yourself emotionally and mentally particularly when you're coming out of a traumatic time of your life. Maybe you're coming out of a church. How can you practice nurturing yourself? And some things that I would tell you is to journal through your primary and secondary emotions. I have a video on that you can look at. How can you practice mindfulness with how you're feeling and let your experiences come out of you? Don't bottle things up, but acknowledge them, process them, let them move through you. The next thing that I would say, that self-compassion consists of being kind to yourself, being warm with yourself and understanding. It is offering yourself patience, which isn't always easy, especially for me, and kindness. It is understanding that we are all broken people in need of God. We are all broken people in need of salvation, in need of the good news, and none of us are better than another. We are all in need of this. We are all broken, and nobody is better than you. Nobody is less broken than you are. Nobody is in less need, maybe that's the way I should say it, of God's salvation, his mercy and compassion than us. We're all the same. We all equally need him. And then the last thing, which we already said, is the being mindful of your emotions. Acknowledging them. Don't dismiss them. Ask questions to the things that come up in your mind. So if you're, for example, you're feeling really emotional today, you're feeling really quick-tempered and you don't know why, well, ask yourselves questions. Where is these things coming from? What sparked this? And acknowledge them. Be a bystander to your emotions and then let them pass through. So we're going to jump into the second portion of this video, which is being critical of other people. And this is something I think that is really hard for us to admit as human beings, which is being critical and judgmental of other people's, especially as Christians. We like to validate some of these things as, oh, well, I'm just trying to love people and tell them everything they're doing wrong because that's what I'm supposed to do, sitting on my high horse. And, there's an aspect which we're going to talk about, some verses that say, like, we, because of love, we call out some of the things to our friends, like, hey, I don't know that you should be doing this. And we do it because we love them and we want what's best for them. But there's a level of asserting your opinion into people's lives when you're not even in someone who speaks into their life. And, there's a level of giving your opinion when it isn't needed or when it's not asked for. And so it's being mindful of those things. We don't know who's safe sometimes. And so it's really easy to just decide to be critical of other people when we don't know if they're safe. This is something that I experienced a lot after walking through spiritual abuse, is this really harsh criticism of other people that I never used to have. I have a very strong empathy and compassion. Like, I will cry at the drop of a hat if I see somebody else crying or emotional. But when I went through what I went through, I found myself being really critical of other people in the church when I was trying new churches, and not just critical of people in general, but specifically people in the church setting, because I didn't want to get hurt again. So it's easier for me to just criticize and assume that they aren't safe people. And the thing with this is, the less we demand perfectionism from ourselves, the less we're going to demand perfectionism from other people. The easier you are on yourself, the easier you are going to be on other people, which we've talked about. Anytime that we're critical or judgmental of others, we're indirectly boosting our own ego. Oh, I can't believe she's wearing that to church today. I can't believe that she decorates her house like that. I can't believe that she would post that on social media. By saying those things, we're indirectly boosting our own ego of, well, we know better and we do better and we know what's right compared to that person. And that's, I think, a lot of what you'll see with these keyboard warriors online who want to nitpick every post of every little thing, where it's like, it's doing it to make yourself feel better in the moment. And the problem with doing that, the problem with criticizing other people to make you feel better about yourself, and to make you have a little boost of your self-worth is that it's short-lived and your self-worth is not going to be boosted in the long run. And what might have felt good for a moment will leave you feeling 10 times worse later, because you're going to be looking back thinking about how miserable of a person you feel because you acted that way, and how you're alone, and maybe how you don't have the amount of people in your life you'd like to because you just push them all away because you're critical of people. So while it might have made you feel good in the moment, and this is a really another good indicator of someone does something to you, do you feel the need to call up 10 people to get validation that they're wrong and you're right? If that's the case, I would, and I've done this before, and I'm sure a lot of us can say that we have, the problem isn't them, it's you. If you have to call up 10 people to get validation that what someone else did to you is wrong, you're the problem. I'm not saying that maybe they didn't say something that was wrong, but you having to continuously seek that validation from other people over and over again is something that you need to make yourself feel better and to boost your own ego while putting down the other person. And there's a quote that I read, and I love this. I'm going to read it to you guys. It says, "Impulsive criticism of others is like emotional fast food. It feels good for a few seconds, but quickly makes you feel a lot worse." I know if I went and ate a cheeseburger with french fries and a shake, I might feel so good in that second, but about 30 minutes to an hour goes by and I'm miserable, probably less, because my body does not like that kind of food. And if we want to stop being so critical of other people, some healthier ways to improve your own self-worth so you don't have to get it from beating somebody else down is by doing something productive and valuable with yourself. If you are going on social media, beating up what other people are doing or posting, why don't instead you do something valuable and productive with your own life? If you're going into the church and you're criticizing every little thing that they're doing with their mission or in the community or whatever it is, why don't you in turn go do something valuable and productive with your own time? And again, this isn't to say, like, as the church, we really need to look within and not be so judgmental of the world, and look within our own house and see how we can be better, because the institution of church needs a lot of work. There has been so much abuse covered up. There's been so much misuse of funds and, lack of transparency, so much. And so we really need to seek justice for people. And that is not what I'm talking about. We need to seek justice for people who are being wronged in the church. But we need to not be overly critical of every little thing and make sure that we are people who are being productive and using our time valuably. And you're not going to have your time wasted being so critical and analyzing every little thing of everybody else, because you're going to have something better to do with your time. And in the process of doing that, you're going to genuinely feel so much better about yourself, because you're going to look at your life and you're going to feel good about your life. You're not going to need the validation from other people. You're not going to have to put someone else down to make you feel better about your life. Our speech should be edifying. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, "Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another." Hebrews 10:24 says, "Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds." And Galatians 6:1 gives the primary motivation for criticizing with a warning. "Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you may also be tempted." It's really easy to be critical and point out I can't remember how this verse goes, like the log in somebody else's eye when you've got a whole thing in your plank in your own eye. And why don't we be people who focus on being kind and uplifting and encouraging and edifying within ourselves and then with other people? Because if you can't learn to do these things within yourself, then you're not going to be able to pour out that love to other people. So often my clients will say, I read these verses and I don't know why I'm struggling so hard to implement them. And it is because of trauma. It is because of the things that you've been through, that you've adopted these coping mechanisms. And if you want one-on-one support walking through how to step into a life where you are compassionate, where you are edifying, where you live out what the Word of God tells you to do, then make sure that you can book a free discovery call with me to learn a little bit more about my services and see if I would be a good fit for you. Starting on December 2nd, I'm going to have a big schedule change and will have a lot less availability for coaching calls. And so if you want to make sure that you get into my schedule, make sure you book that call soon so we can talk more. Let me know in the comments what other conversations you guys would like to have around healing from spiritual abuse. See you next time.